Hello everyone, I'm Ken Winter, and I wanted to put together this video on projen and using external modules with a private GitHub repo for package management. If you're not familiar with projen, then you can head over to the GitHub, check out this talk. You can see the link right here in the README, and that'll give you a little overview on what it is, where it came from, and you can look through some of the docs. And also that talk is from the last CDK day in 2020. So speaking of CDK day, there's a new one this year coming 30th April. Go ahead and check it out if you're interested in submitting a talk. They're still accepting presentation proposals, so go ahead and look and hope to see you there. There's also a CDK Slack community, so you can hop over to the cdk.dev Slack workspace if you're interested in learning more. Let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to work on. So with external modules, you can create modules similar to ones that are supported natively in projen. For example, the one I use the most is the AWS CDK app, and maybe you have some internal structure that you want to keep using over and over and over, and just force your different teams to do this, or a couple different things that you want to create without having to set up boilerplate code, and you can enforce some different pieces of your organization using these external modules. I've gone ahead and created a repository for the demo, and you can follow along and look at all that, or you can check out the README and look at the various steps that I've thrown together to kind of walk through this process. So we're not going to generate it from scratch and type everything out live, but I will walk you through some of the important pieces. So you can hop over and do npx projen new JSII, and I'm going to go ahead and do a synth false just so that it doesn't try to download everything. So if you're not super familiar, I would just leave it at this, but if you're already familiar with projen, then you can go ahead and do -- comments false, and it won't generate a lot of the comments that you can see in your projen RC file. So that's the first step. It will generate everything that you need, and it will look a little bit like this. So you'll get a new JSII project, you'll have a name, repository, and some of these different values. If you left comments, then you'll see a bunch of other items in there. So some of the pieces that we need to hit are the name of the package. So in order for everything to work correctly, you need to have this scope. So GitHub requires you to have all of your packages stored as scoped packages, and without this, you're gonna run into some issues and wonder why this isn't working. So first thing first, go ahead and add your organization scope to the front of that package name. Then you're gonna want to change the JSII FQN, fully qualified name value. If you're only planning on supporting one project type in your package, then you can just change it to something like this. So you can do demo project or whatever that is, and it'll look everything up when you go to create those. If you plan on supporting more, or you just don't want to worry about it, you can remove it, and when you create the new project, it'll just look it up for you. Then you need to set your npm dist tag. So maybe it's latest, maybe it's beta, maybe it's alpha, whatever that value is. I left mine at latest. And then you need to set your npm registry URL. So here's the one for GitHub, https://npm.pkg.github.com. Those are the primary pieces that you need when setting up this file. Another boilerplate item that you're going to need is going into your settings in GitHub, going to develop settings, I believe, personal access tokens, and you're going to want to generate a new token. So setting that up, and you're going to give it the repo and the write packages access. Those are the only things you need for that token, and then give it a name or note, whatever, and demo, whatever that value is. Scroll down to the bottom, generate token. It'll give you a value, and then you can copy that. So what you're going to do with that value is pop over to your repository settings, go to your secrets, new repository secret. You're going to name it npm token, and then you're going to pop that value into here and then add secret. So that'll get you set up with the access token, and that way when the JSII release package goes to publish it, it will use that token and everything should work correctly. So we breezed through that pretty quickly, but that is your basic project setup. So whether you have some of these developer dependencies for writing out files, I use them because at some point you want to generate a file. And I use it for FS Extra for things like making sure the path exists, reading the directory, etc. I've also written a small little module, and by written I mean borrowed and adapted from change case, so that we can set up Pascal case based on our project directory. That way I didn't have to include the module as a dependency, and I just wanted to give that credit up here. So here in our index.ts, we have our sub-project, and we are building this off of an AWS CDK TypeScript app. It will extend that app, and then we set up our super constructor. Because this is internal private to our organization, we're going to set license to false, and that way it will never generate that license file when you're creating the new project. Even when someone passes in license, it's still going to say false every time. Then we grab our project name based off of the current working directory. And this is a pretty simple example, pretty trivial. I just wanted to kind of showcase the different things. So we're going to include the SNS package and the SNS subscriptions, because all this is going to do is set up a boilerplate application that creates an SNS topic and sets up that subscription for an email address. Maybe you want it for alerts or whatever that is. And then we have an option for people to pass in sample code when they create it. By default, we want that created. And if they know what they're doing and whatever, they don't want to do it, that flag to turn it off is just sample code. Here in our sample code, it extends component, and we have a couple different values. So the demo project, and then these, maybe you want to set your account values across everything. This isn't by any means necessary. Like I said, kind of just a simple example to get your brain rolling on what would be possible. So this sample code will get called on synthesize, and then we check here if any of the TS files exist. If so, we just bail out. We don't want to overwrite anybody's code, any of the projects that they already have in there. If not, we go ahead and grab a project type. I just called it project type, and we pass it to the project name to Pascal case. And so in our example later, I have a directory we're working out of is projen testing, and so this project type will be called projen testing. So then we create our sample directory, which is the source directory, and we're going to create a main TS file, and then we're going to give it the main TS contents. So it will look something like this. There are a couple ways to go about this. I wanted to pass in some different values and not do anything complicated, but maybe you save these out as external files and read them in, whatever that looks like for your process. But it's going to set up a basic stack deployment, and so we're going to grab these dev account, prod account values. We're going to set our basic stage account region, pass this context into the app, and then we're just going to say new app based on the stage, and then synthesize. So that'll be our main file. Popping back up here, and then we'll have our lib directory. This will be just a simple stack file, and this is only going to create our topic and then our email subscription for SNS, and that's it. Like I said, there are a lot more things here. I've used it internally and kind of just scaffolds my entire project with the way that I would like some of our internal setup to be. And then we're going to set the tests. So the unit tests are basically just going to import that stack and then make sure that an SNS topic was created. And that's it. That's it for the index file. And then you can create some unit tests. So this just says that the source directory is source, the lib directory is lib, what our CDK version looks like when we pass this in. Not super complex. So then we need to run a yarn build. And now we're going to want to test this locally. So if you pop over to the README, I have this disclaimer in here There is a slight bug when testing these modules locally, and with scoped packages, it won't actually install correctly. The first synthesization will work, and after that, if you try to run it again, it will fail because it can't find that package, and I can kind of show that example as well. But you'll just build your external module with yarn build, and then in a separate directory, you can do npx projen new -- from, and then give it the path to that file that was created for in your dist directory. So we're going to do that over here. Let's clear this out, make sure there's nothing in here. And then we are going to do this, GitHub, Casey Winner. Oops. Since I've already done this a couple times and deployed it, it's actually on 0.0.3. And we got an error because we didn't call new -- from. So while we wait for this to go, we can pop back over to our packages. So if you're doing this on your personal account, I didn't know this, but when you're looking at your settings, your name can still count as a scope and organization. And then so you come over, look at your profile, and then you can see your packages, and they're right here. If you have an organization, you would go to that organization, and you can look at your different packages and your repositories. So we're not going to set up the local Git repository right now. All right, so that external module was created. So this is what I was talking about when I mentioned all the comments being created. But you can see it created a demo project, and it's pulling this in from @KCWinner projen GitHub demo. So like I said, the first time it will work locally. The second time it's going to fail because it can't actually find that module. So if you want to test locally for now until the issue is fixed, you can just remove that scope, call it, and everything will work correctly. In reality, you really only need to test that first synthesis usually, just because you want to make sure everything is created correctly, all the values are what you're expecting. And then you can see this JSII fully qualified name here, and it's pulling from our demo project. Let's go ahead and remove these just because, in case we come back later. And then if we look at our source directory, you can see this main.ts file was created with our dev account, our prod account, and all these values. It's importing projen testing stack, and then it will create it based off of the stage. So if you just did a yarn deploy, then it would do projen testing -dev by default. This is the way that I typically go about my stacks. I know a lot of other people have, a dev one, they will copy a prod one, whatever that looks like. And then if we pop into our lib, here you can see, we've got our relevant imports of SNS and SNS subscriptions, and then error notification emails are going to go to support@support.com, and then it's just going to create the error notification topic and then loop through that email array to create that subscription. And then if we look at our unit test, we'll check for that topic, so we can run yarn test. And everything should look good, as I've already tested this out and made sure everything worked before we recorded this video. I know it's a pretty trivial example, but I've used it to set up my deployment pipelines for any sort of new app I want to create. Maybe you have something that you haven't written as a construct, but you maybe it doesn't need to be a construct, but you want to reuse it over and over. A bunch of different use cases out there, and it doesn't even have to be the AWS CDK. Maybe you do it with a React app, maybe you do it with Next.js, maybe you create some new sort of thing that hasn't been merged into the projen project itself. So, your possibilities are endless. And let's pop back over to this. So we tested everything locally. Now, what do we do after we publish it, right? We need to gain access. So you want to generate your own personal access token. So again, pop over to that personal access tokens and generate a new token. whatever, and then maybe it's just read packages and maybe repo access, whatever that looks like for your scope. You create it, and then you are going to, well, let's take a step back. So everything works locally, you've tested everything, so now we actually need to publish it. So if you look at your workflow in your release, so after we edited the projen RC, we added the npm registry, we added the name with our scope. So then when we look at this release npm, you'll see the different action down here for the JSII release. So it'll grab that npm token, so this is where it grabs your personal access token, sets the dist tag, so like I said, maybe you change this to beta, alpha, whatever, and then npm registry is set to the package github.com. So when you commit everything, it'll run in here, and then you'll see your package show up in GitHub just like this. So now we have everything pushed, and we want to pull that locally. Again, generate that access token, and then you're going to want to log in and make sure you set this scope. So we would do npm login scope kc at kc winner, and then we're just going to go ahead and grab this, and then it'll ask you for your username. So kc winner, it'll ask you, that password is going to be your token, which I have, and I'm going to grab from somewhere else. And then your email address. All right, then you're logged in. You can view it in your .npmrc file. I'm not going to show that because it'll have my token in there. So you'll be able to see those values. And now we actually want to see that we can see that package. So npm view at kc winner, and then it's projen GitHub demo. So we have access. If this fails, then you either didn't log in correctly, your token, maybe your scope is set up incorrectly with that login. So here we can see that package. Now let's go ahead and clean this up. So we have nothing in here, and we're going to grab our package from there. And we're going to do synth false just for expediency. So everything's been deployed to your local organization, private, internal to GitHub. Let's not set that up right now. Go ahead and look. And here we have everything again. It didn't synthesize any of the files. It just set up the projen RC and the version file. So we have the package correctly, the GitHub demo. So everything should work now correctly because we're not testing locally. So we set that up. You can see our source files, and everything looks the same. Resolving our packages, and then we're good to go. Hopefully this demo helps when you want to set one up internally. Pretty easy to set up with GitHub. I also have a blog post at kennethwinter.com on how to set it up with Code Pipeline or Code Build. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to join the cdk.dev Slack workspace. Check out CDK Day, April 30th, 2021, and have a good day.